Hey, good morning, Shabbat Shalom, Good Yontif, Chag Sameach. I'm very glad to be here today. Today is actually my first time in shul over Pesach. I've had COVID, and it is as advertised. I'm lucky, though, that I was triple vaxxed and otherwise okay. And my doctor did say I could come out and play today. So it's okay. The only thing that's kind of left is I am really tired. I might fall asleep during my sermon even before you do. Some of you commented on my color and that I don't have one today. But I'm here because first of all, I like being here. But it's important. Today is Yizkor, and it's the first Yizkor of the holiday cycle. Passover is the first of the biblical holidays. It goes, Pesach, Shavuot, then into Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. This is the beginning of the cycle. It's the first Yizkor since Sukkot. And the world didn't get a lot better. Life didn't get easier or more simple. And it's a really difficult, really emotional time. And because it's so emotional, I think that's why it's so important for us to get together and to be together. Whether this is your first time saying Yizkor or your 50th time saying Yizkor, it's very challenging, it's very difficult. Sometimes it's because we mourn someone we really miss. It's not only that we loved them, but we really liked them. They made our lives better. We felt good when we were around them. And we talk about how they always live in our hearts, but sometimes you just like to have lunch with them. Just a bagel and schmear. And it's very difficult, but it's bittersweet. Right? You had someone in your life who was unambiguously good for you. But we also sometimes have people in our lives who are what I call yes and people. Yes, there were moments that were great and not. And both are true, but it's very hard to reconcile sometimes. Sometimes we're grieving for what could have been. Sometimes we grieve because we kept waiting for it just to be better. And when the person is gone, that moment is gone. And sometimes we grieve, and this is harder to face, we grieve for what should never have been in the first place. For a word that should never have been said. For an action that never should have been done. And even if there are apologies, even if there are attempts at reconciliation, which there aren't always, it still hurts. And I think the power of Yizkor is facing that together and coming together and saying, yes, there were beautiful people in our lives, and sometimes there weren't. And I was thinking a lot about this heading into the Seder, and we talked a little bit about this with the men's club Seder, about the idea of the what they call the four sons, the Arba Banim, but really the four children who we talk about at the Seder. Each one of these is a yes and person. And I've been thinking about what these kind of types of people are. They're not the only kinds of people, but there were four that were brought specifically for the Seder. The first is the Chacham, we call the wise one. Now that might be someone who's actually really smart, who is really, really bright, but that is a person who could also be a perfectionist, where nothing is ever good enough, where it could be someone who was just very judgmental. That's, yes, very bright, and came with other things. The Rasha, the wicked one, is someone who's probably really fun. If you think about the most fun that you ever had, and we're not going to ask, it was probably with your Rasha friend. I mean, obviously not you. But they could be volatile. You may never know when they're going to go off. The same person who is super fun might also be the person with the temper that you're always walking around with eggshells, the one that you're always trying to rationalize their behavior. But they're nice to so-and-so. So again, they're really fun. You might enjoy being around them, but you just never know when they're going to go off. And you live with that sort of pit in your stomach all the time. The next is the Tom, the simple one. The Tom might be someone who just never bothers anyone. They're not a burden, they're not a problem, but they may also be someone who's also just very distant. They're just not there even when they're there. There was a country song, one of the lines was, "I'm so lonely, it's like having you here." They just sort of see things in black and white, see things very simply, but in a world where there's so much gray, where there's so much in between, to only see the world in a simple way can cause a lot of harm. And the Eino Yodea Lishol, the one who doesn't know to ask, could be someone who doesn't challenge you. You know, they're not going to say, "Why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that?" Which could be good at some times, but it also might just reflect a lack of interest, a lack of reflection, a kind of a distance, even a lack of self-reflection. Everything's fine the way it is. Why should I? I'm fine. Why should I question it? Or everything's fine, why should I question? Again, each of these things has positive, each of these things has a number of negatives. And in the past I've thought about, well, which of us is these people? Or are we all of them at different points in our lives? But the question that I asked myself this year, and it kind of hit me hard in a lot of ways, is which of these raised us? Which of these were our parents, our aunts and uncles, and who raised them? Were you raised by a Tom, a simple one, who was raised by a Rasha? How many generations back? And it's a hard thing to face. I think we build up illusions about our loved ones. And what Judaism asks, I think what the Seder is asking with these, is just face it honestly. Be open to it. The hurt and the pain is there. Running from it doesn't help. But developing insight into it does. It doesn't mean that it's all okay. It doesn't mean that it was fine. But it means that you can learn to live with it. It means you can find ways to create meaning in your lives. And there are two tools I really want to offer today that I have found helpful in dealing with loss. The loss of someone who was unambiguously good, the loss of lost opportunities, and the loss of one who did harm. Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away recently, was a very, very important spiritual teacher for me. And he was 95 when he passed away, but became sad for me living in a world where he wasn't in it anymore. And he wrote a beautiful book called Reconciliation about how to deal with the pain from childhood, the pain from adolescence. And again, it might be the loss of someone who was just beautiful, but is just not here, or maybe that you lost when you were at a very young and vulnerable age. And he said, visualize yourself holding that child and just comforting them. Not solving them, not fixing it, but to take the child, to take the adolescent you were as the adult you are today, and just hold them and to just comfort them. And I found that a very, personally, a very powerful technique, and I'm getting a little verklempt. One thing about COVID is that I have been far more emotional, and it is far more raw and very cathartic, but so I'm just going to need a sec, but I'll be okay. But that technique was and is very helpful to me. But the other is our coming together as a people and to realize that we are part of a people, that our immediate family, our immediate circle is just part of who we are. At the Seder, we don't just invite these four types, these four children. We invite everyone who wants to be liberated from their pain and suffering. We may not be able to change the circumstances of our lives. Things happen, things are beyond our control. But we can liberate ourselves from the feelings of suffering that come by remembering that we are part of a people who had the courage to leave Egypt. We are part of generation after generation after generation of people who have said that we cannot fix everything, we cannot guarantee everything, but what we can do is live each moment of our lives with meaning, with gratitude, with a sense that our lives make a difference in the world today and our lives make a difference for future generations. Our immediate lives do not have to be our destiny. The way we were raised, the way that the people who raised us were raised, we can do something about that cycle. We can say, yes, we have gone through difficulties, but we can also say, and we will live with joy anyway. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.